The billionaire handed his limitless credit card to the poor little girl as a test, expecting her to buy toys or candy. But when he saw what she really bought, his heart completely shattered. Before we dive into the story, leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story and don't forget to like this video if it touches your heart. Robert Harrison adjusted his Italian silk tie as he stepped out of his black Bentley onto the bustling sidewalk of downtown Chicago. At 35, he commanded a tech empire valued at $12 billion, but today felt different, emptier somehow. The November wind cut through his expensive coat as he walked toward his favorite coffee shop, the same route he'd taken every morning for the past 3 years. That's when he saw her. A small figure huddled against the brick wall of the old bank building, wrapped in a thin purple jacket that had seen better days. She couldn't have been more than 7, with matted brown hair and eyes that held far too much wisdom for someone so young. In her small hands, she clutched a cardboard sign that simply read, "Please help, hungry." Robert had passed hundreds of homeless people over the years, always too busy, always too important to stop. But something about this little girl made his steps slow and then stop altogether. Maybe it was the way she didn't look at him with desperate eyes like the others. Instead, she sat quietly, almost dignified in her small suffering. "What's your name, sweetie?" Robert heard himself ask, crouching down to her level. She looked up, startled. "Sophie," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the city's noise. "Sophie, what a beautiful name." Robert studied her face, smudged with dirt, but holding an innocence that reminded him of something he'd long since lost. "Are you out here all alone?" She nodded, clutching her sign tighter. "My foster mom said I had to earn my keep or find somewhere else to stay." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. How could anyone put a child, a baby, out on the streets? In that moment, an idea formed in his mind. Not charity, a test. He wanted to see what this child would do with unlimited power, unlimited resources. Would she be like everyone else in his life? Greedy, selfish, taking everything she could get? Robert reached into his wallet and pulled out his black American Express card, the one with no spending limit, the one that could buy anything money could buy. Sophie's eyes widened as she saw the sleek metal card. "Sophie, I want you to take this," he said, placing the card in her small palm. "You can buy anything you want with it, anything at all." Her fingers trembled as she held the card. "But sir, I don't understand. This isn't mine." "It is now. Use it as you see fit." Robert stood up, his heart pounding with an emotion he couldn't name. "There's a shopping mall 2 blocks in that direction. The card works everywhere." Before Sophie could protest further, Robert walked away, but not too far. If you're enjoying this incredible story, please leave a like to help us reach more people with these inspiring messages. He ducked into the coffee shop across the street, positioning himself near the window where he could watch. He pulled out his phone and quickly accessed the mall's security cameras, a perk of being a part owner of the development company that built it. What happened next would either confirm his cynical view of human nature, or it would change everything he thought he knew about the world. As Sophie stood up, still clutching his card in both hands, Robert felt his breath catch in his throat. For the first time in years, he genuinely cared what someone else might do. Sophie stared at the mysterious black card in her trembling hands as she walked slowly toward the shopping mall. The weight of it felt heavier than anything she had ever held. People rushed past her on the sidewalk, executives in expensive suits, women carrying designer handbags, teenagers laughing on their phones, but she barely noticed. Her mind was a whirlwind of possibility and fear. The sliding glass doors of the Riverside Mall hissed open, and Sophie stepped into a world she had only ever seen through shop windows. Bright fluorescent lights made everything gleam. Clean marble floors reflected her tiny figure, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery made her stomach rumble so loudly she felt embarrassed. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, not since Mrs. Watson had screamed at her for accidentally breaking a coffee mug. From his coffee shop across the street, Robert pulled up the security footage on his phone with shaking fingers. Camera 1 showed Sophie standing just inside the entrance, looking completely overwhelmed by the bustling crowd around her. A security guard noticed her and started walking her way, likely thinking she was a lost child or a potential shoplifter. Camera 2 captured Sophie walking slowly through the massive toy store, her eyes wide as she took in the towering displays of dolls, video games, and stuffed animals. An electronic dinosaur roared as she passed, making her jump back. For a moment she pressed her face against the glass, watching other children inside, begging their parents for the latest gadgets. Camera 3 showed her pausing at the electronics store, staring at the wall of tablets and gaming systems that most kids her age would kill for. A salesman approached her, clearly annoyed by her scruffy appearance, and Sophie quickly moved away. But Sophie kept walking, her destination unclear. "Where are you going, little one?" Robert whispered to himself, his coffee growing cold in his hands. Several other patrons in the coffee shop noticed his intense focus on his phone, but he didn't care. Nothing else in the world mattered except watching this small child navigate her first real choice. She stopped at the grocery store. Through the security feed, Robert watched Sophie approach the customer service desk, her small hands clutching the black card like a lifeline. The teenage clerk, probably no older than 16, with bright pink hair and multiple piercings, looked down at her with poorly disguised irritation. "Can I help you?" the girl asked, popping her bubblegum and checking her watch. Sophie held up the black card with both hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, miss, can I buy food with this? The kind man said I could buy anything, but I've never used a card like this before." The clerk's eyes widened dramatically when she saw the American Express Centurion card. Her attitude instantly switched from annoyed to shocked. She had likely never seen one in real life. These cards were reserved for the ultra-wealthy, people who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. "Oh, yeah, sure, sweetie. That card works everywhere, literally everywhere." The clerk leaned forward, curiosity replacing her earlier hostility. "Where did you get that?" "A kind man gave it to me," Sophie replied simply. Then she asked the question that would change everything. "Can you help me figure out how to buy food for a lot of people?" Robert rushed out of the coffee shop, nearly knocking over a businessman reading his newspaper. He needed to see this with his own eyes, to witness up close what this extraordinary child would do with unlimited purchasing power. He positioned himself behind a magazine rack near the grocery store entrance, close enough to overhear Sophie's conversation with the butcher, but hidden enough to go unnoticed. Sophie had gone to the bread aisle first, and Robert watched as she carefully examined each loaf. She wasn't grabbing randomly. She was comparing prices, reading labels, making deliberate choices. She selected 4 loaves of the cheapest white bread, then moved methodically to the deli counter. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely to the butcher, a kind-faced man in his 50s. "May I please have enough turkey and ham for many sandwiches?" The clerk smiled down at her, clearly charmed by her politeness. "How many sandwiches are we talking, little one?" Sophie's small face scrunched in concentration as she counted on her fingers. "Maybe 20. There are a lot of hungry people outside who don't have homes. I want to make sure everyone gets enough." She paused, then added, "And can you make it thick? When you're really hungry, thin sandwiches don't help very much." Robert felt his chest tighten. "When you're really hungry." This child was speaking from experience. The butcher's expression softened completely. "You know what, sweetheart? I'm going to give you the premium meat, but I'll charge you for the regular, and I'll make sure you have plenty." "That's very kind of you, sir, but you don't have to do that," Sophie replied seriously. "The man gave me this card and said I could buy anything. I think that means I should pay the right price for good food." Robert's coffee cup slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor and shattering. Other shoppers turned to look, but he didn't notice. His eyes were glued to the scene unfolding before him. A 7-year-old child was teaching a grown man about integrity and fairness. Sophie continued shopping with the focus of someone on a mission. She added jars of peanut butter and jelly, then stopped in the soup aisle. Robert watched as she carefully read the labels, choosing the most nutritious and hearty options rather than the cheapest. As she reached for cans of beef stew, a store employee approached her. "Are you shopping by yourself, dear?" the woman asked with concern. "Where are your parents?" "I don't have parents anymore," Sophie answered matter-of-factly. "But it's okay. I'm shopping for my friends who are hungry." The employee looked uncertain, clearly not knowing how to handle this situation. "Maybe you should wait for a grown-up to help you." "I am being helped," Sophie said, holding up the black card. "A kind man trusted me to do something important." What kind of 7-year-old speaks with such clarity about trust and responsibility? Robert continued to follow Sophie through the store, his awe growing with every item she selected. After loading her cart with practical, nutritious food, she headed to the clothing section. But instead of looking at children's clothes, she went straight to the adult section. "Excuse me, ma'am," Sophie said to a saleswoman. "Do you have warm socks? The really thick kind that keep your feet warm when you have to sleep outside?" The saleswoman, a woman in her 30s with a gentle smile, knelt to Sophie's level. "Honey, are you buying these for someone special?" "For a lot of people who don't have warm places to sleep," Sophie explained. "And maybe some gloves too. It's getting cold, and their hands hurt when it's cold." Robert watched as the saleswoman helped Sophie select thermal socks, warm gloves, and even a few wool hats. The woman's eyes kept filling with tears as Sophie explained why she needed each item. "Will that be all, honey?" the cashier asked as Sophie finally approached the checkout with her overflowing cart. Sophie looked around the store one more time, then back at the black card in her hand. "Can I buy more things?" The man said I could buy anything. "That card has no limit, sweetie. You can buy whatever your heart desires." Sophie's eyes lit up, and for a moment Robert braced himself. "Here it comes," he thought. "Now she'll remember she's just a kid and buy toys and candy like any normal child would." But Sophie surprised him once again. "Can I get some of those hand warmers, the kind you shake and they get hot? And maybe some band-aids and medicine for people who are hurt?" She paused thoughtfully. "Oh, and can I get some of those little bottles of shampoo? Some of my friends haven't been able to wash their hair in a long time." The cashier's expression shifted from professional politeness to genuine emotion. "Of course, sweetie, let me help you find those things." Robert watched in utter amazement as Sophie filled her cart with personal care items, first aid supplies, and comfort items. Nothing for herself, everything for others. When she got to the checkout, the total came to $643. "Are you absolutely sure about this purchase?" the cashier asked gently, holding the black card carefully. "It's a lot of money, and you're so young." Sophie nodded solemnly. "My mommy always said money is just paper unless you use it to help people. I want to help people." As Sophie struggled to manage all her bags, several employees offered to help her carry them to her destination. She politely accepted their assistance, directing them toward the exit with the confidence of someone much older. Robert followed the small procession outside, his worldview cracking with every step. In 35 years of life, surrounded by wealth and privilege, he had never encountered anyone, adult or child, who thought of others before themselves when given unlimited power. Sophie's first stop was an elderly man sitting near the bus stop, wrapped in newspapers for warmth. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely, approaching him with one of the store employees still helping carry the bags. "Are you hungry, child? You don't need to worry about an old man like me," said William, the elderly homeless veteran Sophie had approached. His face, weathered from years of harsh weather and harder circumstances, showed surprise and concern as he looked at this little girl with armfuls of groceries and store employees hovering around her. "But I do want to worry about you," Sophie replied with simple sincerity, directing the employees to set the bags down carefully. "My mommy always said caring about people is what makes us human." Robert, still hidden but close enough to hear every word, pulled out his phone and started recording. Not for evidence or social media, but because he knew what was happening was so extraordinary that no one would believe it without proof. Sophie began unpacking her bags with the methodical efficiency of someone much older. She handed William a thick sandwich, a can of beef stew, warm socks, gloves, hand warmers, and a small bottle of shampoo. "Do you know where other hungry people are? I bought enough for lots of people." William's eyes filled with tears as he held the sandwich in his trembling hands. "Sweet child, what's your name?" "Sophie." "What's your name, sir?" "William." I haven't been called sir in years." His voice broke slightly. "There's a group of us who sleep behind the library. We try to look out for each other, but winter's coming and it's getting harder. Can you take me there? I want to share with everyone." As they walked, William called out to other homeless individuals they passed. His voice echoed down the street with an excitement Robert had never heard from someone living on the streets. "Sarah, Marcus, Tommy, come here. This little angel has food for us." Word spread quickly among the homeless community. By the time they reached the area behind the library, a small crowd had gathered. Robert followed them, staying hidden behind cars and trees, but close enough to witness everything. With each person Sophie helped, his chest grew tighter, his breath more labored. These were not random acts of kindness. There was something deeper going on here, something that defied every assumption he'd ever made about human nature, about childhood, about what really mattered in life. Behind the library, Sophie found a dozen people huddled around small fires burning in metal drums. The ages ranged from teenagers to the elderly, all wearing the tired, resigned look of those whom society had forgotten. When Sophie appeared with her bags and her small army of new friends, several of them stood up in surprise. "Everybody, please sit down and get comfortable," Sophie said with a natural authority that belied her age. "I brought food and warm things for all of us." For the next 2 hours, Sophie worked like a tiny commander of compassion. She made sandwiches with the care of a professional chef, opened cans of soup and shared them, distributed warm clothing with an eye for each person's specific needs, and most remarkably, listened to each person's story with the focus and empathy of a trained counselor. She remembered names instantly, asked about their health and circumstances, and somehow made each person feel seen and valued in a way they likely hadn't experienced in years. Robert watched from behind a tree, his hands shaking as he continued to record. A 7-year-old child was doing what he, with all his billions and supposed business acumen, had never thought to do: treat homeless people like human beings worthy of dignity, respect, and individual attention. But the moment that completely broke him came when Sophie noticed a pregnant teenager shivering in the corner, apart from the group. "Are you okay, miss?" Sophie asked, approaching the pregnant teen with the gentle care one would show a wounded bird. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, with hollow eyes and clothes that had seen too many seasons. "I'm fine, sweetie," the girl replied, but her voice trembled with more than just the evening chill. "You don't have to worry about me." Sophie studied her carefully, then disappeared into her remaining bags. She pulled out the warmest coat she had bought, a thick, lined jacket originally intended for one of the older men, and wrapped it around the pregnant girl's shoulders with infinite tenderness. "Babies need to be kept warm," Sophie said simply, adjusting the coat to cover the girl's stomach. "And mummies need to be warm too, so they can take care of their babies." The pregnant girl, who later introduced herself as Jessica, began to cry silently. I don't know how to take care of a baby. I don't have anywhere to go, and I'm scared." Sophie sat down next to her, taking Jessica's hand in her small ones. "What's your baby's name going to be?" "I don't know yet. I don't even know if it's a boy or a girl." "That's okay," Sophie said seriously. "When my mommy was pregnant with me, she didn't know either. But she told me she talked to me every day, even before I was born. She said babies can hear love." Jessica's tears flowed harder. "Your mommy sounds like she was special." "She was. She's in heaven now, but she taught me that love is the only thing that really matters." Sophie's voice grew stronger. She said that when we take care of other people, especially people who are scared or hurt, we are being God's hands and feet on earth. Robert felt his throat close up completely. He leaned against the tree for support as Sophie continued to speak with wisdom that seemed impossible for someone so young. Jessica, can I tell you something my mommy told me? The girl nodded, wiping her eyes. She said that sometimes God gives us hard things to do because he knows we're strong enough to do them, and he always sends helpers. Sophie squeezed Jessica's hand. Maybe that's why I'm here tonight. From the circle of homeless friends, others began to speak up. William offered to help Jessica find social services. Sarah, an older woman, promised to teach her about baby care. Marcus, a young man who had been quiet all evening, offered to help her find a safe place to stay. Robert watched in amazement as this small child had not only fed and clothed these people, but had somehow created a community of care around the one who needed it most. As the evening wound down, Sophie stood up and walked to each person in the circle, giving them hugs that lasted longer than politeness required. "Thank you for letting me share dinner with you," she said to the group. "You made me feel like I have a family again." "Sophie," William called out as she prepared to leave, "you'll always have a family here. You gave us something more valuable than food and clothes. You gave us hope." Robert watched Sophie finally take her leave, promising to come back and check on everyone, especially Jessica and her baby. As she walked away from the library, holding the empty shopping bags and the black credit card, Robert saw her completely differently than he had just hours before. This was not just a homeless child who'd been kind with someone else's money. This was a teacher, a healer, a light in the darkness he hadn't even realized was surrounding his own life. He followed her as she walked back to her original corner where he had found her. But instead of sitting down with her cardboard sign to continue begging, Sophie did something that shattered Robert's heart into a million pieces. She carefully folded up the sign and dropped it into a nearby trash can. Then she sat down on the cold concrete, pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, and took out the black credit card. She looked at it for a long moment, then looked up at the darkening sky, filled with the first evening stars. "Thank you, God," she whispered, her breath visible in the cold air, "for letting me help people today. It was like being with Mommy again." Robert stepped out from his hiding spot, his decision made. He could no longer pretend to be a stranger, could not continue this charade of testing her. Sophie looked up as he approached, and her face lit up with genuine joy and recognition. "Sir, I was hoping I'd see you again." She held out the credit card with both hands, offering it back like a sacred object. "Thank you for letting me borrow it. I bought food and warm things for my friends." Robert knelt beside her, his voice thick with an emotion he hadn't felt since childhood. "Sophie, that card is yours to keep. You can use it whenever you want for anything you need." Sophie's eyes widened in awe. "Really? I can buy more food for people, and maybe help Jessica find a place for her baby." "You can buy anything you want, sweetie. Anything at all." Sophie was quiet for a moment, her 7-year-old mind processing this incredible gift. Then she looked directly into Robert's eyes with a maturity and clarity that took his breath away. "Sir, can I ask you an important question?" "Anything." "Why did you really give me this card? Were you testing me to see what kind of person I am?" Robert's mouth fell open. How could she possibly understand what he'd been doing? Sophie continued, her voice gentle but knowing. "My mommy always said that God sometimes sends people into our lives to teach us things we need to learn. Maybe you needed to learn something today, too." In that moment, Robert Harrison, billionaire, CEO, master of the universe, realized that he was the student. And this 7-year-old child was the teacher he'd been looking for his entire life without even knowing it. But what Sophie said next would change everything. "Sir, I have something important to tell you, but first, can you help me with something? Jessica back there needs to go to the hospital to make sure her baby is okay, but she's scared because she has no money and no insurance. Can we help her?" Robert's world tilted on its axis. After everything this child had already done, after the miracle he had just witnessed, she was still thinking of others, still putting someone else's needs before her own comfort and safety. "Of course we can help her, Sophie. We can help her with everything she needs." Sophie smiled, but then her expression turned serious again. "Good. Now I can tell you the important thing." She looked up at him with those old, knowing eyes that seemed to see right through his soul. "I know who you are, mister. Harrison. Robert's blood ran cold. You know who I am? Sophie nodded solemnly, her small hand still clutching the black credit card. You're Robert Harrison. You own Harrison Technologies. Your picture was in the hospital newspaper when my mummy was sick. The world seemed to stop spinning. Robert felt dizzy as he knelt on the cold sidewalk next to this extraordinary child. Sophie, why was my picture in the hospital? Because you donated the money to build the new children's cancer wing, Sophie replied, her voice soft with memory. The nurses showed my mummy the article. They said a very rich man wanted to help sick kids get better. Robert's throat tightened. He remembered that donation, $50 million given mostly for tax benefits and positive PR. He'd attended a groundbreaking ceremony, posed for a few pictures, and never thought about it again. My mommy was so happy when she saw that article, Sophie continued, her eyes growing distant. She was very sick, and the doctor said the new machines in the wing might help her. She kept your picture on her bedside table and she prayed for you every night. She prayed for me. Robert's voice came out as barely a whisper. Every night. She said people who help children must have good hearts, but that sometimes rich people are very lonely. She prayed that God would send you friends and family who really loved you. Sophie paused, studying his face carefully. Mommy was right, wasn't she? You are lonely. The question hit Robert like a physical blow. In all his success, surrounded by employees, business partners, and social acquaintances, he couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked about his loneliness. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had cared enough to ask. Yes, he admitted, the words scratching his throat. I am very lonely. Sophie stood up and without hesitation wrapped her thin arms around his neck in a hug that felt like coming home. You don't have to be lonely anymore, Mr. Harrison. God sent me to be your friend. Robert held this small, fierce child, and he felt 35 years of carefully constructed walls crumble around him. When was the last time he cried? When was the last time he felt this kind of pure, unconditional acceptance? Sophie, he managed to say, your mother sounds like she was an incredible woman. She was. She always said God puts people in our lives for reasons, even if we don't understand why at first. Sophie pulled back to look at him seriously. I think maybe God put you in my life tonight, because you needed to remember what love feels like. And maybe he put me in your life because I needed to remember that there are still good people in the world. Robert felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. This child, this wise, generous, miraculous child, was speaking truths that his Harvard MBA and decades of business experience had never taught him. Sophie, where are you supposed to sleep tonight? Her face fell. Mrs. Watson said not to come back unless I brought money. I usually try to find a safe doorway when it gets too cold. The thought of this child sleeping on the streets, especially after what she had just done for others, was unbearable. That's not happening. Not tonight. Not ever again. But Mr. Harrison, I don't have anywhere to go. Robert looked into her trusting eyes and made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Yes, you do. You're coming home with me. Robert's penthouse apartment occupied the entire top floor of Chicago's most exclusive building. When the private elevator opened directly into his living space, Sophie stepped out and gasped. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights. Original artwork worth millions adorned the walls, and Italian marble floors reflected the soft glow of designer lighting. Mr. Harrison, Sophie whispered, your house is like a palace. But as Sophie explored the space, Robert saw it through her eyes and felt ashamed. Despite the luxury, the apartment felt cold, sterile, unlived in. There were no family photos, no personal touches, no signs that anyone truly called this place home. Are you hungry? Robert asked, opening his rarely used refrigerator to find only expensive wine, takeout containers, and bottled water. A little, Sophie admitted. But Mr. Harrison, what about Jessica? You promised we'd help her. Robert had almost forgotten. In his awe at discovering Sophie's connection to his past, he had temporarily lost sight of the pregnant teenager still sleeping in the cold behind the library. You're absolutely right. Let me make some calls. For the next hour, Robert worked his phone like the CEO he was. He arranged for a medical team to find Jessica and take her to the best hospital in the city. He secured a furnished apartment for her and the baby with 2 years' rent paid. He organized job training and ongoing medical care. By the time he was done, he had spent more on a homeless teenager than most people make in a lifetime. If you're feeling the emotion of this story as much as I am, share in the comments which part touched you the most. Sophie listened to every call, watching him with growing admiration. You can really do all that just by talking on the phone. When you have money and connections, you can solve a lot of problems, Robert replied. Then he paused. But I've never used them to solve problems like this before. Why not? The simple question hung in the air. Why hadn't he? He'd had the power to help people his entire adult life, but he'd been too focused on building his empire, too convinced that charity was something you did for tax write-offs and public relations. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe because no one ever showed me what real kindness looks like. Sophie nodded wisely. My mommy said, sometimes people need teachers. Maybe I'm supposed to teach you about helping people, and you're supposed to teach me about... What? Robert looked around his sterile palace and realized he had no idea what he could possibly teach this child that she didn't already know better than him. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorman buzzing from downstairs. Mr. Harrison, there's a woman here claiming to be a social worker. She's asking about a child named Sophie. Robert's blood ran cold. Tell her I'll be right down. What's wrong? Sophie asked, seeing his expression. Someone is looking for you. Mrs. Watson probably called social services. Robert knelt to her level. Sophie, I need you to know something. I'm not going to let anyone take you away or hurt you. Do you trust me? Sophie looked into his eyes with that ancient wisdom. Yes, Mr. Harrison, I trust you. As they rode the elevator down, Robert's mind raced through legal possibilities. He had lawyers, influence, resources. Surely he could protect one small child. But when the doors opened and he saw the stern-faced woman waiting with 2 police officers, he realized money might not be enough to solve this problem. Mr. Harrison, the woman said, stepping forward, I'm Margaret Foster from Child Protective Services. We received a report about an adult male taking an unaccompanied minor from the streets. I'm going to need you to step away from the child. Ma'am, there's been a misunderstanding, Robert began, but Margaret Foster cut him off with a raised hand. Sir, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've heard every story, every excuse. A homeless child does not end up in a billionaire's penthouse without something inappropriate happening. Her voice was sharp, professional, completely unmoved by Robert's status or wealth. Sophie moved closer to Robert, slipping her small hand into his. Ms. Foster, Mr. Harrison didn't do anything bad. He helped me help other people, and now he's helping me. Honey, adults sometimes make children think they're helping when they're really not. That's why we have rules to protect kids like you. Margaret's tone softened as she addressed Sophie, but her eyes remained fixed on Robert with deep suspicion. One of the police officers stepped forward. Mr. Harrison, we're going to need you to come down to the station for questioning. Standard procedure in cases involving minors. Robert felt panic rising in his chest. Officers, surely we can sort this out reasonably. I was simply trying to help Sophie find safe shelter for the night. By taking her to your private residence. Margaret's eyebrows raised. Mr. Harrison, even if your intentions were good, what you did was kidnapping. You removed a minor from her legal guardian without permission or proper procedures. Mrs. Watson isn't a legal guardian, Sophie spoke up, her voice stronger than Robert had heard it all day. She's just a foster mom who doesn't want me anymore. She told me to leave and not come back unless I brought money. Margaret knelt to Sophie's level, her expression softening. Sweetheart, I know foster care can be hard, but there are proper ways to handle these situations. Adults can't just take children home, no matter how much they think they're helping. But he wasn't taking me, Sophie insisted. I asked to stay with him because he's lonely and I'm lonely, and lonely people should take care of each other. Robert watched the interaction, feeling helpless despite all his power and influence. How could he explain to these people what he had witnessed tonight? How could he make them understand that Sophie wasn't just any child, that what had happened between them was something extraordinary? "Ms. Foster," he said carefully, "before you make any decisions, there's something you need to know. Sophie spent today using my credit card to buy food and supplies for homeless people. She didn't buy a single thing for herself." "What kind of 7-year-old does that?" Margaret's expression didn't change. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate that you may have observed some kind gesture, but that doesn't change the fact that you violated multiple laws tonight. Children belong in proper homes with proper supervision, not in bachelor pads with men they just met." "He's not just a man I met," Sophie said, her voice growing frustrated. "His money helped build the place where my mommy died. She prayed for him every night. God sent me to help him remember how to love people." For the first time, Margaret looked uncertain. "Sophie, what do you mean about your mother?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "My mommy died in the children's cancer wing Mr. Harrison paid for. She said people who help sick kids must have good hearts, but that rich people are sometimes very sad and lonely. She made me promise that if I ever met someone rich and lonely, I would try to be their friend." The room fell silent. Robert saw something shift in Margaret's expression, a crack in her professional armor. "Even if that's true, honey, there are procedures we have to follow. Mr. Harrison can't just decide to take care of you." "Why not?" Sophie asked with heartbreaking simplicity. "He has a big house and a lot of money, and I have nowhere to go. Mrs. Watson doesn't want me, and he does. Why can't people who want to take care of each other just take care of each other?" Robert found his voice. "Ms. Foster, what would it take legally, properly? What would it take for me to become Sophie's guardian?" Margaret studied his face carefully. "Background checks, home studies, court hearings, financial assessments. The process takes months, sometimes years. And Mr. Harrison, you are a single man with no experience raising children. The courts favor stable family environments. So what happens to Sophie tonight? She'll go into emergency foster care while we sort this out." Robert's voice cracked with emotion. "She goes back to a foster home where she's not wanted, back to the streets." Sophie's grip on Robert's hand tightened. "Mr. Harrison, will I see you again?" Before he could answer, Margaret's phone rang. She stepped away to take the call, speaking in low, urgent tones. When she returned, her expression was troubled. "Mr. Harrison, there's been a development. We just received a call about your activities tonight. Someone reported seeing you give a credit card to a homeless child, then follow her around town. The caller claimed you were grooming her." Robert's heart sank. Who would make such an accusation? The caller identified herself as Grace Watson, Sophie's foster mother. Sophie's face went white. "Mrs. Watson called? But she told me to leave and never come back." Margaret Foster's expression hardened as she studied both Robert and Sophie. "Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Watson claims that Sophie has a history of lying and manipulating adults for money and attention. She says the child is disturbed, possibly dangerous." "That's not true!" Sophie's voice rose in panic. "Mrs. Watson is mean to me. She locks me in the closet when I make noise, and she takes the money that's supposed to be for my food and clothes." "Sophie," Margaret said gently but firmly, "children sometimes exaggerate when they're upset." Robert felt anger building in his chest. "Miss Foster, you've spent 15 minutes with Sophie. I've spent hours. This child is the most selfless, honest person I have ever met. She used unlimited purchasing power to feed the homeless. What disturbed child does that? Mr. Harrison, you're emotionally invested now. That's exactly why we have protocols." One of the police officers stepped forward. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. There are serious allegations being made." But before anyone could move, Sophie did something that stunned everyone in the room. She pulled out her phone, a battered device Robert hadn't even noticed she had, and started swiping through videos. "Wait," she said urgently. "I can prove Mrs. Watson is lying." She held up the phone, showing a video of herself from earlier that day, sitting on the corner with her cardboard sign. The timestamp showed it was recorded at 11:47 a.m. "I make videos sometimes," Sophie explained, her voice shaking but determined, "to remember my mommy's voice when she taught me things. But this morning, I recorded Mrs. Watson being mean to me." She swiped to another video recorded that morning. Mrs. Watson's voice came out of the phone's speaker, sharp and cruel. "I'm done feeding you, you brat. If you can't earn your keep, then get out. Don't you come back here unless you bring me money. And don't you dare tell anyone I kicked you out, or I'll make sure they put you somewhere much worse." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Mrs. Watson's continued verbal abuse coming from the phone. Sophie's small face was visible in the corner of the video, tears streaming down her cheeks as she tried to reason with the woman. "Please, Mrs. Watson, I'll be good. I won't break anything else. I'll try harder to be quiet. You're a burden, Sophie. Your mother should have kept her legs closed instead of bringing another welfare baby into the world. Now I'm stuck with you until the state finds someone else stupid enough to take you." Margaret Foster's face had gone pale. "Sophie, how long has Mrs. Watson been speaking to you like this?" "Ever since I came to live with her 8 months ago after my mommy died." Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "She only wanted me because the state pays money for foster kids. But she says I eat too much and cost too much." Robert knelt beside Sophie, his heart breaking. "Why didn't you tell me about the videos before?" "Because grown-ups don't usually believe kids when we tell them bad things about other grown-ups. They think we're making it up or being dramatic." Sophie looked up at Margaret with those old, weary eyes. "But you can't say I'm making it up now. Can you, Ms. Foster?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing what she had heard. "Sophie, do you have other videos like this?" Sophie nodded sadly. "Lots. Mrs. Watson is mean to all the kids she has. She takes our food money and spends it on herself. She locks us in rooms when she has friends over. She tells people we're bad kids so they won't believe us if we complain." One of the police officers leaned in to Margaret. "Ma'am, if there's evidence of abuse and neglect, shouldn't we be investigating the foster mother instead of Mr. Harrison?" Robert felt a surge of protectiveness so strong it startled him. "Sophie, I want you to know something. You will never, ever have to go back to Mrs. Watson. I don't care what I have to do or how long it takes. You are safe now." Sophie looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Do you really mean it?" "I mean it with everything I have." Margaret Foster closed her phone and looked at Robert with new eyes. "Mr. Harrison, given these new circumstances, I think we need to have a different conversation. But first, we need to ensure Sophie's immediate safety." "What does that mean?" Sophie asked. "It means," Margaret said softly, "that you are not going back to Mrs. Watson tonight or any night." Sophie's face lit up with the first real smile Robert had seen from her all day. "Does that mean I can stay with Mr. Harrison?" Margaret hesitated. "It's complicated, but yes, at least for tonight, while we get this properly sorted out." As the police officers prepared to leave, one of them turned back to Robert. "Sir, you should know that what that kid did today, feeding all those homeless people, that's already spread through the department. Half the guys want to meet her, and the other half want to adopt her." After the officers left, Robert and Sophie stood alone in the lobby, both emotionally drained, but somehow lighter than they had been hours before. "Mr. Harrison," Sophie said quietly, "are you really going to try to keep me?" Robert knelt and took her small hands in his. "Sophie, I'm going to try to become the man your mother prayed I would be. And if I can do that, then yes, I'm going to try to keep you forever." 3 weeks had passed since that extraordinary night, and Robert's entire world had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. His sterile penthouse now showed the signs of a child's presence. Coloring books on the coffee table, a pink backpack by the door, children's cereal in the kitchen cabinets. But more than the physical changes, Sophie had brought life into spaces that had been empty for years. Robert sat in a lawyer's office, reviewing the mountain of paperwork required for emergency guardianship. Across from him, James Morrison, Chicago's most expensive family lawyer, shuffled through documents with the practiced efficiency of someone who had navigated these waters many times before. "Mr. Harrison, I have to be honest with you," James said, removing his glasses to clean them. "Your case is unusual, to say the least. Most single men seeking to adopt don't begin by taking a homeless child home from the streets. Most single men don't meet children like Sophie," Robert replied, his voice firm with conviction. "The social workers are impressed with the home environment you've created, and Sophie's psychological evaluation shows she is thriving under your care. Dr. Sarah Chen said she's never seen a child bounce back from trauma so quickly." James paused, studying Robert's face. "But the court is going to want to understand your long-term intentions. This isn't just about providing temporary shelter." Robert had been asking himself the same question for weeks. When he first brought Sophie home, it had been an impulsive act of protection, but watching her slowly blossom in an environment of safety and unconditional love had awakened something in him he never knew existed. "James, I spent 35 years building a company, accumulating wealth, achieving every goal I thought mattered, but I was dying inside, slowly, quietly, completely. Sophie didn't just save herself that night. She saved me too. The court is going to need more than emotional testimony, Robert. They'll want to see concrete evidence that you can provide stable, long-term care for a child who has experienced significant trauma." The door opened and Sophie bounced into the room, her face glowing with excitement. In the 3 weeks since leaving the streets, she had gained weight. Her eyes had lost their haunted quality, and she moved with the natural energy of a healthy 7-year-old. "Mr. Harrison, guess what happened at school today?" She climbed onto the chair beside him, chattering excitedly about her new teacher, her progress in reading, and the friends she was making. James watched the interaction with professional interest. "Sophie, can I ask you a question? Do you understand what these meetings are about?" Sophie nodded seriously. "You're trying to decide if Mr. Harrison can be my forever daddy. Ms. Foster explained it to me. And how do you feel about that?" "Happy," she said simply. "Mr. Harrison takes care of me the way my mummy did. He reads me stories, and he makes sure I eat vegetables, and he sits with me when I have nightmares about being hungry." Robert felt his chest tighten with emotion. In 3 weeks, this child had taught him more about love than he had learned in the rest of his life combined. "Sophie," James continued gently, "sometimes children feel like they have to say what they think adults want to hear. You can tell me the truth about how you really feel." Sophie looked at James with that surprising maturity that had first captured Robert's attention. "Mr. Morrison, when my real mommy was dying, she told me that God would send someone to take care of me. She said I would know who the right person was because they would love me, not because they had to, but because they wanted to." She turned to look at Robert with shining eyes. "Mr. Harrison loves me because he wants to, and I love him because he has a good heart that just needed someone to remind him how to use it." James made a note in his file, clearly touched by Sophie's words. "Mr. Harrison, there is one more thing we need to discuss. The Mrs. Watson situation." Robert's expression darkened. "What about her?" "She's under investigation for neglect and financial fraud. Apparently, Sophie's videos prompted other children to come forward. The investigation has uncovered a pattern of abuse spanning several years." Sophie's face grew serious. "Are the other kids okay?" "They've been placed in better homes," James assured her. "Your courage in recording those videos may have saved other children from what you experienced." Robert reached out and squeezed Sophie's hand. "You are incredibly brave, sweetie. My mommy always said that when we see something wrong, we have a choice. We can pretend we don't see it or we can try to fix it. I wanted to fix it." After Sophie left to play in the reception area, James leaned forward, his expression serious. "Robert, I have to ask, are you prepared for this long term? Raising a child isn't just about providing material support. Sophie has experienced trauma that could surface in unexpected ways. There will be challenges you can't solve with money." Robert thought about the last 3 weeks, the nightmares that still sometimes woke Sophie. The moments when she would hoard food because she was afraid of going hungry again. The way she would flinch when adults raised their voices. But he also thought about her laughter, her insights, the way she had transformed not just his apartment, but his entire outlook on life. James, a month ago, I thought success meant building the biggest company and amassing the most wealth. Sophie has taught me that real success means building something that matters. Family, love, connection. I'm not just prepared to be her father. I need to be her father. And the company, your work? Robert smiled. I've restructured my schedule. I work from home 3 days a week now. I've hired additional executives to handle travel, and Sophie comes to the office with me sometimes. The employees adore her. That's a major change. The best change I've ever made. Robert stood, his resolve crystallizing completely. James, whatever it takes, background checks, home studies, court appearances. I want to adopt Sophie. Not just guardianship, full adoption. James nodded, making more notes. Then we'll need to prepare for a long process. But Robert, based on what I've observed today, I think you have a very strong case. As they prepared to leave, Sophie ran back into the room. Mr. Harrison, can we go visit our friends at the library today? Jessica had her baby and I want to meet him. Robert's heart swelled. Even in her new life of safety and comfort, Sophie hadn't forgotten the people who needed help. Of course we can, sweetie. Walking out of the law office with Sophie's hand in his, Robert realized the little girl had been right all along. God had brought them together, not to test Sophie, but to save them both. But their biggest test was still ahead. Tomorrow they would face the family court judge who would decide their future together. The family court of Cook County was intimidating even for someone with Robert's wealth and confidence. Dark wood paneling, high ceilings, and the imposing bench where Judge Patricia Williams would decide their fate created an atmosphere that made both Robert and Sophie feel small and vulnerable. Sophie sat beside him in her best dress, a simple blue number they had picked out together for this crucial day. Her hair was neatly braided, and she clutched a folder of drawings she had made, wanting to show the judge what their life together was like. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Williams, the bailiff announced. Judge Williams was a stern-looking woman in her 60s, with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see through pretense right to the truth. She had presided over family court for 23 years and had a reputation for putting the well-being of children above all other considerations. "Please be seated," she said, reviewing the thick file before her. "We are here today to consider the petition of Robert Harrison for the full adoption of Sophie Marie Collins. Mr. Morrison, you may present your case." James Morrison stood and methodically outlined his argument. He presented character witnesses, financial records proving Robert's ability to provide for Sophie, psychological evaluations showing Sophie's remarkable progress, and testimony from teachers about her academic and social development. But Robert knew that no amount of paperwork would matter as much as what Judge Williams saw when she looked at them together. "Mr. Harrison," Judge Williams said, addressing Robert directly, "this court has reviewed your petition with considerable interest. Your case is highly unusual. A single man with no prior experience with children seeking to adopt a child he met under extraordinary circumstances." "Yes, Your Honor. The social worker's report indicates you have made significant lifestyle changes to accommodate Sophie's needs. Can you tell me why you are willing to make such sacrifices?" Robert felt Sophie's small hands slip into his for encouragement. "Your Honor, I wouldn't call them sacrifices. Before Sophie came into my life, I had everything money could buy, but I had nothing that truly mattered. Sophie has taught me the difference between success and significance. She didn't just need a home. I needed a family." Judge Williams made a note, then turned her attention to Sophie. "Sophie, I understand you have something you'd like to share with the court." Sophie stood carefully, clutching her folder. "Yes, ma'am, Your Honor. I made some pictures to show what my life is like now." She opened her folder and pulled out the first drawing, a crayon image of 2 stick figures holding hands in front of a tall building. "This is me and Mr. Harrison at his house." See, I drew windows because he has lots of windows, and now I can see the whole city from my room. Judge Williams smiled slightly. That's a very nice drawing, Sophie. Sophie pulled out another drawing. This is us reading books together. Mr. Harrison reads me stories every night, even when he's tired from work, and he lets me pick the stories sometimes. She continued through her drawings, each one showing a different aspect of their life together, cooking breakfast, visiting their friends at the library, Sophie doing her homework, while Robert worked on his computer nearby. And this last one, Sophie said, holding up a drawing that made Robert's throat tighten with emotion, is my family tree for school. See, I drew my mommy in heaven watching over us and me and Mr. Harrison holding hands on earth. My teacher said families don't have to look the same to be real families. Judge Williams studied the drawing carefully. Sophie, can you tell me how you feel about Mr. Harrison becoming your official father? Sophie's face grew serious with the gravity of the question. Your Honor, when my real mommy was dying, she told me that sometimes God sends people into our lives at just the right time. She said I would know my new family because they would love me, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She turned to look at Robert, her eyes shining. Mr. Harrison loves me because he wants to, and he takes care of me the way my mommy did. He makes sure I eat vegetables, helps me with homework, and hugs me when I have bad nightmares. But most important, he lets me keep helping other people like my mommy taught me. What do you mean by helping other people? Sophie brightened. We visit Jessica and her baby every week. Mr. Harrison is paying for her to go to college so she can get a good job, and we bring food to our friends at the library every Saturday. And Mr. Harrison started a program at his company where they hire people who don't have homes and help them get back on their feet. Robert felt a swell of pride. Sophie was right. Her influence had spread far beyond their personal relationship. Inspired by her example, he had restructured part of his business to create employment opportunities for homeless individuals, complete with transitional housing and support services. Judge Williams turned back to Robert. Mr. Harrison, I have to ask a difficult question. Sophie has experienced significant trauma in her young life. Are you prepared for the possibility that challenges may arise as she grows? Adoption is a permanent commitment, not just during the easy times. Your Honor, 3 months ago, I thought being a parent would be about providing material stability and educational opportunities. Sophie has taught me it's really about showing up every day with love, patience, and consistency. Whatever challenges we face, we will face them together. Judge Williams was quiet for several long minutes, reviewing her notes and studying both Robert and Sophie. The courtroom was silent, except for the ticking of the large clock on the wall. Finally, she looked up. In 23 years on this bench, I have seen thousands of adoption cases. I have learned to recognize when a placement is guided by genuine love versus obligation, convenience, or other motivations. Robert held his breath. What I see before me today is a child who has transformed not only her own circumstances, but the life of the adult seeking to adopt her. Sophie, your wisdom and compassion would be remarkable in someone twice your age. Mr. Harrison, your willingness to reshape your entire life around the needs of a child demonstrates a level of commitment this court finds admirable. She picked up her gavel. It is the judgment of this court that the petition for adoption is approved. Mr. Harrison, you are hereby granted all parental rights and responsibilities for Sophie Marie Collins, who shall henceforth be known as Sophie Marie Harrison. The gavel came down with a sound that echoed through the courtroom like a bell of freedom. Sophie threw her arms around Robert's neck as he lifted her up, both of them crying tears of joy and relief. Around them, the small group of supporters, James Morrison, Margaret Foster, and even a few of Sophie's new friends from school, broke into quiet applause. "Daddy," Sophie whispered in his ear, trying out the word that was now legally and permanently true. "Yes, sweetie, Mommy was right. God sent someone to take care of me, and I think maybe he sent me to take care of you too." Walking out of the courthouse together, officially and forever a family, Robert realized the little girl had been teaching him all along. She had shown him that real wealth was not measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch. Real success was not about what you accomplished, but about who you became in the process. That night, as Robert tucked Sophie into bed in what was now permanently her room, she looked up at him with those wise old eyes that first captured his attention. "Daddy, do you know what the best part about today was?" "What was it, sweetheart?" "Now I get to call you Daddy forever, and you get to call me your daughter forever. We're stuck with each other." Robert laughed, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Sophie Harrison, being stuck with you is the greatest privilege of my life." As he turned out her light and closed the door, Robert reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. A simple test of character had revealed the greatest teacher he'd ever met. A homeless child had shown him the way home, and tomorrow they would wake up as a family and continue building something more valuable than any fortune. A legacy of love that would extend far beyond anything Robert had ever imagined possible. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, leave a comment about which part inspired you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more stories that show the transformative power of kindness. Some stories end with people getting what they want. The best stories end with people becoming who they were meant to be. This was one of the best stories of all.